The April evening was unusually warm for the small Mexican town of San Miguel de Allende. The sun was slowly sinking below the horizon, coloring the narrow streets with shades of gold and terracotta. Isabel Garza Hernandez walked, holding the hand of her husband Ramon, and smiled as she watched the shadows that the ancient lanterns cast on the cracked walls of the houses. Ramon had just picked her up after a parent-teacher meeting at the school where she taught literature. His dark eyes reflected the glow of the setting sun, and a slight smile played on his lips. He was dressed in a simple work shirt that still held the smell of diesel fuel, an unmistakable sign of his profession as a truck driver. "Shall we stop by Donna Lupita's cafe?" Ramon suggested, pointing to a small establishment on a street corner where they had frequented in the early years of their marriage. "I just want to walk with you tonight," Isabel replied, squeezing his hand tighter. "Besides, I made your favorite enchiladas at home." They strolled leisurely through the winding streets, passing a small square with an ancient church whose bells chimed the time. Isabel felt peaceful. Such moments were becoming increasingly rare in their lives. Ramon was often away on long trips and she stayed late at school, checking notebooks and preparing for classes. Their small house was in a quiet neighborhood, only a 10-minute walk from the central square. It was an old building with thick walls that kept it cool even on the hottest days. Isabel was especially proud of her kitchen, small but cozy, with a window overlooking the tiny patio where she grew spicy herbs and flowers. When Isabel entered the house, the first thing she did was head into the kitchen to heat up dinner. Ramon followed her, unbuttoning his work shirt as he went. She loved watching him move even after 12 years of marriage. He still had the grace that had once caught her eye at a town festival. "How was the PTA meeting?" Ramon asked, sitting down at the small kitchen table. Isabel began to talk about the problem students, about plans for the next semester, about how Principal Ricardo Santiago had supported her idea of organizing a literature club. She spoke, passing around hot enchiladas on her plate, and her voice sounded animated. Work was an important part of her life. "And you? How was your day?" she asked, sitting down across from her husband. "A normal day. Delivered goods to the stores. I have a long haul tomorrow. I have to deliver a load to a neighboring state," Ramon replied, taking his dinner with gusto. Isabel looked at her husband carefully. The number of long-distance flights had increased noticeably over the past year, and sometimes she felt lonely in their small house. But Ramon's work provided them with a steady income, allowing them to live modestly but decently. After dinner, they sat in the living room. The old TV was muttering softly about another telenovela, but neither Isabel nor Ramon paid any attention to it. She was checking her students' notebooks, and he was reviewing the route for tomorrow's trip, occasionally consulting with her about roads she might know from her rare trips to visit relatives. Night descended on the city imperceptibly. A cool breeze coming through the ajar window played with the curtains and brought the smell of orange blossom trees from the neighbor's yard. Isabel set the cups of herbal tea on a small table and sat down next to her husband. "I have my first class tomorrow at 8 in the morning," she mumbled, glancing at the wall clock. "We'll need to get up early to prepare materials for the new poetry section." Ramon nodded, finishing his tea. He too had to leave early. The shipment had to be delivered before nightfall. Isabel gathered the notebooks, folding them neatly into her old leather bag that Ramon had given her last Christmas. In the bedroom, Isabel lingered at the window, looking out at the twinkling stars. Tomorrow was the start of a normal workday, but tonight filled her heart with warmth and peace. She could not know that these moments of peace were the last in her usual life, that very soon everything would change, and this cozy house would become the place where a drama would be played out that would turn her world upside down. A light breeze swayed the curtains, bringing the muffled sounds of the nighttime city from the street, the noise of sparse cars, the soft voices of latecomers. Isabel closed the window and turned to the bed, where Ramon was almost asleep. Tomorrow was going to be a busy day for both of them. She lay down next to her husband. The clock on the bedside table counted down the seconds, minutes, hours, the time that inexorably brought her closer to the events that would destroy this fragile world of marital happiness. The morning began with the soft ringing of the alarm clock. Isabel opened her eyes and saw the empty half of the bed. Ramon had already left on his long flight. On the bedside table was a note written in his sprawling handwriting. "I'll be back in 2 days. Take care of yourself. R." She got up, made her bed out of habit, and headed for the bathroom. The cool morning air wafted in through the loose window, bringing with it the smells of the waking city. Isabel was in a hurry. Her first class started at 8 and she still had to get her materials ready for class. In the kitchen, she turned on the coffee maker, an old but reliable machine given to her by her co-workers for her 30th birthday. As the coffee dripped slowly into the cup, Isabel pulled cheese and tomatoes out of the refrigerator for the sandwich she was going to take with her for lunch. Her gaze slid over the kitchen shelves and something subtly wrong caught her attention. The coffee can was not where she usually left it, and the spices were arranged in a different order. Isabel frowned. Perhaps Ramon had been looking for something this morning and had rearranged things. But he was never interested in cooking and rarely touched anything in the kitchen. The school was in its usual morning buzz. Isabel walked down the corridor, greeting colleagues and students. Her classroom was on the second floor, a bright room with large windows overlooking the schoolyard. She liked to arrive early so that she could air out the room and write her lesson plan on the blackboard. Today's first lesson was 9th grade literature. Isabel opened her tattered leather-covered day planner and looked over the notes. They were starting a new topic, 20th century poetry. She pulled the printed poems out of her bag and began laying them out on the desks. "Good morning, Señor Garza." Principal Ricardo Santiago appeared in the doorway. His graying hair was neatly slicked back and he held a folder of papers in his hands. "How are the preparations for the literature circle going?" "Good morning, Señor Santiago. I was just about to discuss with you the list of books for the first class." Isabel pulled another folder out of her bag. "I thought I'd start with contemporary Mexican literature." The principal nodded approvingly, looking over the list. He was always supportive of Isabel's initiatives, considering her one of the best teachers in the school. They discussed a few organizational matters and the principal left, leaving Isabel to finish preparing for the class. The class was a success. The students were discussing the poems, and Isabel felt that special satisfaction that comes when one succeeds in sparking an interest in literature in young minds. At recess, she went into the teacher's lounge for coffee and to review the next lesson plan. The day flew by. The last lesson was 7th grade literature, where they were studying folk legends. Isabel loved this class. The children's eyes lit up with a special sparkle as she told the ancient stories that had been passed down from generation to generation. When Isabel returned home, she went to the kitchen to make dinner and check her notebooks. When she opened the closet, she noticed again that things were not the way she had left them. Ramon's favorite cup, which had always been on the right side, was now on the other side of the shelf. Isabel slowly looked around the kitchen. Something was definitely wrong. She pulled out her cell phone and dialed her husband's number, but it only rang with long beeps. That was normal. On long-haul flights, the connection was often lost. Isabel tried to convince herself that there was a logical explanation, but the unpleasant feeling of unease persisted. She spent the evening checking her notebooks in her favorite chair in the living room. The television was on silent, casting bizarre shadows on the walls. Isabel tried to concentrate on her work, but her thoughts kept returning to the oddities in the kitchen. The next morning, getting ready for work, she took a particularly close look around the house. Everything seemed to be in its proper place, but the feeling of someone else's presence never left her. In the bathroom, the towels hung a little differently than she'd left them, and her favorite shampoo was in a different place than usual. At school, Isabel tried to distract herself with work. During the big break, Principal Santiago approached her to discuss the upcoming faculty council. Noticing her distraction, he asked worriedly, "Senora Garza, are you all right? You seem troubled." "I am fine, Senor Santiago," Isabel hastened to assure him. "Just a little tired. End of the quarter. Lots of work." The principal nodded understandingly, but there was concern in his gaze. He always treated his teachers with a fatherly concern, especially Isabel, who had been at the school for 10 years. When she returned home that evening, Isabel noticed that her favorite vase on the dresser was standing a little differently. She remembered exactly how she had turned it with the handles against the wall in the morning, and now they were facing the room. At that moment the phone rang. It was Ramon. "How are you?" he asked after the usual greetings. "Ramon, did you notice anything strange at home before you left?" Isabel asked instead of answering. "Strange? What do you mean?" "Things in the house. They don't end up where I leave them. In the kitchen, for example, things are constantly rearranged." "Isabel, you're just tired." He sounded slightly annoyed. "Maybe you rearrange everything yourself and forget about it? You have a lot of schoolwork to do right now." Isabel wanted to object, but remained silent. Perhaps her husband was right and she really was too tired. The end of the quarter was always a busy period. Tests, reports, preparations for the pedagogical council. Falling asleep in an empty bed, Isabel tried to convince herself that all these oddities were just a game of imagination. But somewhere in the back of her mind there was a vague uneasiness, a premonition of something bad that was about to happen in her measured and familiar life. Sunday morning was overcast. Isabel sat in a small cafe in the central square, waiting for her friend Consuelo. They had agreed to meet early while the city was still asleep, to talk quietly over a cup of coffee. A cup of cooling Americano stood in front of her, and she absent-mindedly twirled a napkin in her hands, twisting it into a thin tube. The bell over the front door jingled and Consuelo entered the cafe, a tall woman with her dark hair in a tight bun. Her medical uniform suggested she'd stopped by after a night on duty at the hospital. "Sorry I'm late," Consuelo said, lowering herself into the chair across from Isabel. "It was a difficult night on the ward." "That's okay," Isabel smiled, calling her friend by her familiar pet name. "I'm a recent arrival myself." The waitress brought another cup of coffee and a basket of fresh pastries. Consuelo took a sip and looked at her friend carefully. "Tell me about it. On the phone, did you talk about any weirdness at home?" Isabel exhaled slowly. She had been diligently writing down every unusual little thing she had noticed in the house for the past few days, and now she pulled a small notebook with a worn cover out of her bag. "You see, it started about 2 weeks ago. At first I only noticed the little things. Cups rearranged in the kitchen, towels hung differently in the bathroom. I put it down to fatigue, thought I was rearranging things and forgetting. But now," she was silent for a moment, searching for words. Consuelo waited patiently, stirring her coffee with a spoon. "Now I find traces of someone else's presence every day. Yesterday my makeup bag in the bathroom didn't stand the way I left it. The day before yesterday, my favorite perfume was on the other side of the shelf. And Thursday—" Isabel took a breath. "Thursday I discovered that someone had used my favorite coffee cup. It had lipstick residue on it, even though I don't paint my lips at work." Consuelo frowned. "Did you talk to Ramon about this?" "Yes, but he thinks I'm making it up. He says I get too tired at work and start seeing things that aren't there." "Could he be right?" Consuelo asked cautiously. "End of the quarter, lots of reports, a new literature class." Isabel shook her head. "No, I'm sure there are strangers in the house." They were silent for a moment. Outside the window, a fine rain began to drizzle. the drops slowly dripping down the glass, distorting the view of the square. Consuelo tapped her fingers thoughtfully on the table, a habit developed from years of working at the hospital. "Listen," she finally said, "have you noticed anything strange about Ramon's own behavior?" Isabel wanted to answer in the negative, but suddenly she froze. The picture she'd seen 3 days ago on her way home from school came to mind. She'd taken a shortcut through the park and noticed a familiar figure, Ramon, standing near the fountain with a woman. They were talking, standing too close together, and there was a sense of intimacy in the stranger's posture. Isabel had passed by then, convincing herself that she had imagined it, but now— "3 days ago," she began slowly, "I saw him in the park with some woman. They were standing very close, too close for mere acquaintances." Consuelo straightened up in her chair. "Did you ask him about it?" "Yes. He said it was just a work colleague, that they were discussing some work issues." "But—" Isabel fell silent, remembering the details. "You see, this woman, she was very well dressed in an expensive dress, didn't look like a transportation company worker." "And how often does Ramon go on long trips lately?" "More often than he used to. Sometimes for 2 or 3 days, sometimes for a week." Consuelo finished her coffee and set the cup resolutely on the saucer. "Isabel, honey, I hate to say this, but don't you think all this strangeness in the house has something to do with that woman?" Isabel felt a chill go through her insides. She had thought about it herself, but she was afraid to put her suspicions into words. Spoken aloud, they became too real, too painful. "What do you mean?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Maybe while you're at work." Consuelo hesitated, but then continued resolutely. "Maybe Ramon brings her to your house." Isabel closed her eyes. Her friend's words seemed to put all the pieces of the mosaic together: the strangeness in the house, the increased number of long-distance flights, that scene in the park. Everything suddenly made frightening sense. "No," she whispered. "No, Ramon couldn't." "Isabel." Consuelo covered her hand with her own. "Listen to me. I've worked in a hospital for 20 years and I've seen things. People aren't always what they seem, even the ones we think we know best." Outside the window, the rain intensified, drumming on the tin canopy of the cafe. The waitress brought more coffee, but Isabel didn't even notice it. Her thoughts darted feverishly between the memories of the past weeks, putting them together into a new, frightening picture. "What should I do?" she asked at last. "First, you have to be sure. You need to know exactly what goes on in your house when you're away." "But how?" Consuelo thought for a moment. "You have school spring break starting soon, right? Take a couple of days at the beginning of your vacation. Tell Ramon you're going to visit your sister in a neighboring town. You keep an eye on the house." "You're suggesting I spy on my own husband?" Isabel grinned bitterly. "I'm suggesting you find out the truth," Consuelo replied firmly. "It's the only way you'll be able to understand what's going on and decide what to do next." They sat in the cafe for another hour, discussing the details of the plan. When they finally went outside, the rain had stopped, but the sky remained draped in gray clouds. Consuelo hugged her friend goodbye. "Remember, no matter what happens, you can always count on me." Isabel nodded, feeling tears come to her eyes. She walked slowly home, thinking about the conversation with her friend. Each step was difficult, as if her legs were filled with lead. Now that the suspicions had been voiced, they had taken on a new force, turning from vague fears into a real threat to her family's happiness. On Monday, Ramon returned from another flight late at night. Isabel was sitting in the kitchen checking her students' notebooks when she heard the key turn in the lock. She slowly placed the red pen on the stack of notebooks and listened to the familiar footsteps in the hallway. "Are you still awake?" Ramon appeared in the doorway, slightly rumpled after the long drive. He smelled of road, gasoline, and something else, a light floral scent that seemed inappropriately familiar to Isabel. "Been waiting for you," she replied, watching her husband carefully. "Are you going to have dinner? I'll heat it up." While she warmed the rice and chicken on the stove, Ramon talked about the trip, the usual stories about the roads, the traveling companions, and the weather. His voice sounded the same as always, but there was something subtly different in his intonation. Or was it just her imagination? "Ramon," Isabel began, setting her plate in front of him. "Remember I told you about that woman in the park?" Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. "What woman?" "The one you talked to last week. You said she was a co-worker of yours." "Oh, that's what you mean," he shrugged carelessly. "Yeah, Marisol's from accounting. She was preparing some paperwork for the drivers." "Marisol?" Isabel said the name slowly, as if tasting it. "And do you see her often for work?" "Isabel," Ramon's voice had a hint of irritation in it. "What do you mean by that?" "Nothing. Just asking." They finished their meal in a heavy silence. Isabel mechanically gathered the dishes and began to wash the plates, while Ramon went to take a shower. The sound of running water mingled with the noise in her head, thoughts jumbled, suspicions growing like weeds in their little garden. The next morning, Isabel awoke earlier than usual. Ramon was still asleep, his breathing even and calm. She got up quietly and went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. Turning on the coffee maker, she reached for her favorite cup but froze. In its place stood a strange one she'd never seen before. It was dark blue with a gold rim and a small crack at the base. Isabel took the cup carefully in her hands. The bottom showed traces of lipstick, the same shade she had noticed before. She set the cup on the table and rested her hands on the countertop, trying to calm her racing heart. "Good morning." Ramon's voice made her wince. "Is something wrong? Where did that cup come from?" Isabel asked without turning around. "What cup?" "This one." She pointed to a dark blue cup. "I've never seen it before." Ramon stepped closer, glancing carelessly at the cup. Brought this one back from a road trip. Bought it at a gas station when my old one broke." "And that's why there's lipstick on it." There was a heavy silence in the kitchen. Only the coffee maker continued to hum softly, filling the air with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. "You've been acting strange lately," Ramon finally said. "Following me around, asking strange questions. What's going on, Isabel?" "You tell me what's going on." She finally turned to him. "Why do things keep changing in the house? Why do stranger things keep showing up? Why—" "Enough!" Ramon cut her off abruptly. "I'm tired of your paranoia. You're making up stories, suspecting me of all sorts of things. Maybe you should see a doctor." Isabel felt her insides tighten at his words. She silently poured coffee into her usual cup and sat down at the table. Ramon ate a quick breakfast and left, citing early loading. The front door slammed and the house fell into silence. At school, Isabel tried to concentrate on her work, but her thoughts kept returning to the morning's conversation. In her literature class, she had twice misquoted a poem she had known by heart for years. The students looked at her in surprise. This had never happened to Senora Garza before. During the big break, she went into the bathroom and took a long look at herself in the mirror. The woman who looked back at her from there seemed unfamiliar. A gaunt face, dark circles under her eyes, a tense crease between her eyebrows. When Isabel returned home after work, the first thing she did was go to the kitchen. The dark blue cup was gone, as if it had never been there. She methodically searched all the cabinets but didn't find it. But there were shards in the trash can, dark blue with a gold rim. That evening, Consuelo called, "How are you, friend?" Isabel told her about the cup and the morning conversation with her husband. Her friend's voice sounded worried. "So he broke the evidence?" "Isabel, this is getting serious. Have you decided what you're going to do?" "Yes," Isabel replied quietly. "I'm going to take a vacation next week. I'll tell Ramon I'm going to my sister's." "You can stay with me." Consuelo suggested. "You can watch the house from a safe distance." Ramon returned late. He smelled again of the same floral scent she'd noticed yesterday. Isabel pretended to sleep as he lay down beside her. She lay unmoving, listening to his breathing and trying to figure out exactly when things had gone wrong. When had their happy marriage turned into this agonizing game of silence? When had trust been replaced by suspicion? In the morning, she woke to the sound of the door slamming shut. Ramon had already left. She pulled out her phone and texted Consuelo, "I'm ready. Let's start on Monday." The reply came almost immediately. "I'm with you, girlfriend. Everything will be fine." Isabel got ready for work, carefully checking that she had brought everything with her. In the hallway, she paused for a moment in front of the mirror, fixing her hair. From the mirror, a woman looked back at her with a determined look. She wasn't going to back down anymore. It was time to find out the truth, no matter how bitter it might be. On Monday morning, Isabel packed a small bag of belongings as if she were really going to her sister's house. She'd carefully considered every detail. She'd put her favorite dress she'd worn to family gatherings, her makeup bag, a book to read on the road. Everything had to look natural. "Say hello to your sister," Ramon said when she was already standing in the doorway. There was not a shadow of worry or regret in his voice about her departure. "Of course," Isabel replied, trying to speak as calmly as possible. "I'll be back in 3 days." She left the house and got into the cab that Consuelo had called in advance. The driver, alerted by her friend, circled the city and dropped her off outside Consuelo's house. She was already waiting on the doorstep, glancing nervously at her watch. She had a hospital appointment to make. "I've got everything ready," Consuelo said as she ushered Isabel into the apartment. "From the bedroom window, you have a perfect view of your house. I bought binoculars. They're on the windowsill. There's food in the fridge. You can make yourself at home." Her friend left for work and Isabel settled herself by the window. Her house was visible, a 2-story building with white walls and a tiled roof. It seemed alien and hostile now, like a set in a shadow theater. The first day of surveillance dragged agonizingly slowly. Ramon left early in the morning in his truck, and nothing happened until evening. Isabel tried to read, to check the notebook she had brought with her, but everything fell apart. Every sound of a car in the yard made her flinch and rush to the window. In the evening, Ramon returned. From her vantage point, Isabel saw the lights come on in the windows of their house, first in the hallway, then in the kitchen. She imagined her husband eating dinner alone, perhaps warming up the food she had prepared in advance. That image hurt in a special way for some reason. On the second day, she awoke with the dawn. Consuelo had already left for her morning shift, leaving fresh coffee and a note in the kitchen wishing her good luck. Isabel ate breakfast, trying to keep to her usual routine, as if that would give what was happening any sense of normalcy. Ramon left early again. Around 10 o'clock in the morning, a cab pulled into the courtyard. Isabel brought the binoculars to her eyes and felt her heart sink as a young woman in a bright red dress stepped out of the car. She walked confidently toward the house, took out her key and opened the door as if she had done it many times before. Isabel clenched the binoculars so hard her fingers ached. The woman was beautiful with that bright, defiant beauty that draws the eye. Her high heels, her confident gait, the scarf thrown carelessly over her shoulders, all told that she was used to being the center of attention. Through the windows, Isabel watched the stranger move about the house. She passed through the living room, turned on the light in the kitchen. Her every movement was filled with the careless confidence with which a hostess moves through her home. She was opening cupboards, pulling things out as if she knew perfectly well where everything was. At 1:30, a familiar truck pulled into the yard. Ramon got out of the cab, looked around, and walked quickly toward the house. Isabel watched her husband enter the house they shared, where another woman was waiting for him, watched as the two figures merged in an embrace at the kitchen window, watched, unable to look away. They were so engrossed in each other that they didn't even draw the curtains. Isabel saw the woman in the red dress running around her kitchen, pulling dishes from the cupboard, preparing dinner. She saw Ramon hugging her from behind, kissing her neck. Their every movement, every gesture was filled with the kind of intimacy that only happens between lovers. At one point, the woman took out her lipstick from her purse and tinted her lips, looking into a small mirror. Isabel Machine readily took out her cell phone and snapped a few pictures. Her hands were shaking, but the images were clear enough. Ramon and his mistress in the kitchen that Isabel loved so much, where every single thing had been chosen with such care. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the woman in the red dress finally left. Half an hour later, Ramon left as well. Isabel remained sitting at the window, looking out at the empty house. The sun crept slowly toward the horizon. The shadows grew longer, and she sat there, unable to move. The ringing of the phone made her flinch. It was Consuelo. "How are you? Did anything happen?" Isabel slowly, trying to speak calmly, told her friend everything she had seen. Consuelo's voice sounded worried. "I'll be right there. My shift is almost over." "No," Isabel replied firmly. "I have to finish this on my own." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but I can't just sit and watch anymore." She disconnected the phone and turned to the window again. The evening lights were already turning on in the house across the street, but her house stood dark and silent, keeping betrayal and lies within its walls. Isabel pulled a notebook from her bag and began methodically writing down everything she'd seen today, the times she'd come and gone, the descriptions of the women, every detail of their behavior. Her handwriting was uneven, but she forced herself to write legibly, as if she were composing an important document. As darkness fell, she saw Ramon drive up to the house. He entered the house and turned on the light in the living room. Through the window, she could see him sitting in an armchair watching television, such a familiar evening ritual that now seemed like a fake performance. Isabel went to bed late, but sleep wouldn't come. She lay in an unfamiliar bed in Consuelo's house and thought about the fact that tomorrow everything had to end. She could no longer be a mere observer in this drama. It was time to take action. The next day, Isabel woke up early. Consuelo had already gone on duty, leaving a note on the kitchen table. "Call me if you need anything. Be careful." Isabel folded the note and tucked it into her pocket, the little piece of paper seeming to give her strength. She took up her observation post by the window. The morning was overcast, heavy clouds hanging over the city, heralding rain. Ramon left at the usual time, and Isabel began to wait. She knew her mistress would show up again today. In 2 days of watching, she had already figured out their schedule. At 10 o'clock, a familiar cab pulled into the courtyard. A woman in a red dress, today she was wearing dark blue, got out of the car and walked confidently toward the house. Isabel watched as she pulled out her key and opened the door. Something clenched in her chest. This simple gesture seemed particularly offensive. Isabel put on the strict black dress she usually wore to parent-teacher conferences, neatly combed her hair and put on lipstick. Every movement was slow and precise, as if she were preparing for an important presentation to the class. In her bag, she put her cell phone with photos, a notebook with notes, and her house keys. When she left Consuelo's apartment, she didn't go straight to the house. She walked slowly around the block first, gathering her thoughts. A light breeze ruffled the hem of her dress, and thunder rumbled somewhere in the distance. Isabel looked at her watch. It was 11:45. Ramon would be here soon. She had chosen this moment on purpose. Let them see her together, her husband and his mistress. They wouldn't be able to deny it or make excuses. Isabel stopped in front of her house, looking at the kitchen windows where a woman's figure flickered. Ramon's mistress was preparing dinner like a true hostess. At 12 o'clock, Ramon's truck pulled into the yard. Isabel stood in the shade of a tree, watching her husband park the car. He didn't even look around, so sure of his impunity. He simply got out of the cab and headed toward the house. Isabel waited 5 minutes, just long enough for them to relax, to feel safe. Then she walked slowly up the familiar steps. The key slid easily into the lock. This was still her home, no matter how much they tried to appropriate it for themselves. The sound of the door opening was drowned out by the music coming from the kitchen. Isabel recognized the tune, an old romantic song she herself liked to put on in the evenings. She took off her shoes so her footsteps wouldn't betray her approach and walked quietly down the hall. From the kitchen came voices and laughter. A woman's voice said something in a gentle, cooing tone, and Ramon responded with an equally gentle laugh. Isabel stopped in the doorway, staring at the scene before her. Her husband was sitting at the kitchen table, the table they had picked out together at the town market. A plate of food stood in front of him, and a woman in a blue dress fidgeted nearby. She leaned over to kiss Ramon, at which point Isabel spoke softly. "Good afternoon." They recoiled from each other as if scalded. Ramon jumped up from his chair, knocking over his coffee cup. The dark liquid spread slowly across the tablecloth Isabel had bought last Christmas. "Isabel," her husband's voice sounded hoarse. "You were supposed to be at your sister's. As you can see, I decided to return early." She shifted her gaze to the woman in the blue dress. "Won't you introduce us?" Ramon's mistress straightened, lifting her chin. A mocking smile played on her lips. "I'm Marisol, although we've seen each other before. In the park, remember?" "I remember," Isabel nodded. "And do you use my kitchen often, Marisol?" "Isabel, let's talk," Ramon began, but she interrupted him. "I'm not talking to you right now." Marisol laughed, a high, ringing laugh. "Oh dear, it's not just your kitchen I use. Your bathroom is very comfortable, and in your bed—" "Shut up!" Ramon shouted, but it was too late. Isabel felt something inside her break. All these days she had held on, keeping her dignity, trying to understand and make sense of things. But now, looking at this woman who had so unceremoniously invaded her life, she felt her rage overwhelm her. "Get out," she said quietly. "Both of you, now." "This is my house," Ramon objected, taking a step toward her. "You can't—" "Your home?" Isabel laughed. "This house was bought with my parents' money. Every single thing here was chosen by me. Every corner holds my memories. And you just lived here and betrayed everything we had." Marisol stepped forward, still smiling that same mocking smile. "Listen, darling, Ramon doesn't love you anymore. He's been with me for 6 months. You just didn't notice, so busy with your boring job and your boring books." "6 months?" Isabel shifted her gaze to her husband. "All this time, every time you said you were going on a voyage—" "I loved you," Ramon said in a muffled voice. "But you changed. You became cold, distant. All you could think about was work." "Don't you dare!" Isabel's voice broke into a shout. "Don't you dare accuse me of your betrayal. I was working so that we could have a normal life. While you were having fun with that—" "Watch your mouth," Marisol hissed. "You're nothing anymore. An empty place. Ramon is mine now, and this house will be mine too." At that moment there was a deafening roll of thunder and rain poured down outside the window. The heavy drops drummed on the glass like an accompaniment to a drama in progress. Isabel stared at the two people in front of her, the man she had loved for 12 years, and the woman who had stolen him from her. "I'm not going anywhere," she said firmly. "This is my home, and if anyone has to leave it, it's you." Ramon suddenly grabbed her by the shoulders. "Stop your hysterics. You're acting like a child. Pack your things and leave. I'm filing for divorce." "Get your hands off me," Isabel gritted through her teeth. "Now." "Or else what?" Marisol grinned. "Call the police? And what will you tell them? That your husband doesn't love you anymore?" Isabel silently pulled out her phone and showed them the pictures. The screen clearly showed the two of them hugging in the kitchen. Ramon turned pale and Marisol jerked forward trying to snatch the phone. Isabel took a step back. "Don't even try it. Copies have already been sent to my lawyer." It was a lie. No lawyer she had. But they didn't know that. Ramon released her shoulders and sank heavily into the chair. "What do you want?" "For you to get out of my house. Now." "Let's go," Marisol said abruptly, grabbing her purse. "Let's not waste time with this hysterical woman. I have an apartment. Let's stay there for now." She headed for the exit, sure that Ramon would follow her. He hesitated for a second, then stood up as well. "I'll be back for my things." "You're not coming back for anything," Isabel blocked the door. "All your things will be outside in an hour. You can get them from there." They walked away in the pouring rain, Marisol clacking her heels on the wet pavement, and Ramon slouching and not looking back. Isabel closed the door and slowly settled to the floor. Only now did she feel how badly her hands were shaking. The rain had not stopped. Isabel sat on the hallway floor with her back against the door and listened to the drops drumming on the roof. The clock on the wall showed 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but it felt like an eternity since she had entered the house and seen her husband and his mistress in her kitchen. The phone in her pocket vibrated. It was Consuelo calling. Isabel stared at the screen for a few seconds before answering. "Hello?" "Isabel, what's wrong? I saw Ramon leaving with some woman." "Yes." The voice sounded muffled and unfamiliar. "Can you come over?" "I'm on my way out. Don't go anywhere." Consuelo appeared 15 minutes later, wet from the rain with a worried face. She went straight to her friend, still sitting by the door, and knelt down beside her. "My God, you're shivering." It was only now that Isabel realized that she was actually shivering. Consuelo helped her up and led her into the kitchen. Ramon's cup of coffee was still there, a coffee stain on the white tablecloth. "Now I'll make you some tea," Consuelo said firmly, turning on the kettle, "and you'll tell me all about it." As the water boiled, Isabel slowly, with agonizing pauses, recounted what had happened, about how she had entered the house, how she had seen them together, how Marisol had taunted her. Consuelo listened in silence, only occasionally shaking her head and squeezing her friend's hand tighter. 6 months, Isabel pronounced when the story was finished. "All that time, while I thought he was on voyages, he was with her." "The scoundrel," Consuelo exhaled. "And that one of his, how did she only have the nerve?" She poured the tea into clean cups, not the ones Ramon and Marisol drank from, but old ones from Isabel's grandmother that were stored in a far cupboard. She added honey and cinnamon, as she always did when they had a heart-to-heart talk. "What are you going to do now?" Consuelo asked, holding out the cup to her friend. "I don't know." Isabel cradled the cup in her palms, warmed by its warmth. "He said he's going to file for divorce." "And the house? It's your house, you said?" "Yeah, my parents helped with the down payment. The papers are in my name." Consuelo set her cup resolutely on the table. "So the first thing to do is change the locks. He shouldn't be able to come back whenever he wants." "He said he was coming to get his things." "Exactly. Let's pack them up right now. Put it all in boxes and leave it out front like you promised, and then we'll call a locksmith." For the next 2 hours they methodically packed Ramon's things. Every t-shirt, every sock, every little thing that belonged to him went into cardboard boxes that Consuelo had brought from the back room of the hospital. Isabel moved as if in a dream, mechanically folding clothes, documents, her husband's personal belongings. In the closet she found an unfamiliar tie, dark blue, with a small pattern. Ramon had never worn such a tie, so it was a gift from her, from Marisol. Isabel crumpled the tie and tossed it into the box, feeling a wave of anger rising inside. "Hush, hush," Consuelo put her arm around her shoulders. "Don't let them hurt you again." When all the boxes were drawn up at the front door, Consuelo called for a locksmith. The elderly man worked quickly and silently, only occasionally casting sympathetic glances at the two women. An hour later, the locks were replaced, and the old keys were left lying on the nightstand in the hallway, useless pieces of metal. "You can't stay here alone," Consuelo declared as the locksmith left. "You're going to come to my place." "No," Isabel shook her head. "I should be at home. This is my home, and I won't let them kick me out of here." "Then I'll stay with you. I have the day off today and the day shift tomorrow. I'll be around if you need me." Isabel wanted to object, but realized she couldn't. The thought of being alone in a house where every corner reminded her of betrayal was almost physically painful. She nodded silently, and Consuelo immediately went to work in the kitchen, preparing dinner and throwing away everything Ramon and Marisol had touched. In the evening, as they sat in the living room with plates of warmed soup, the doorbell rang. Ramon stood on the threshold, drenched, disheveled, his eyes red with anger. "The key doesn't fit," he said instead of greeting. "I changed the locks," Isabel replied calmly. "Your things are in the boxes. You can take them and never come back. You have no right to—" "Yes, I do. The house is mine, and I don't want you here." The figure of Marisol loomed behind him, hiding under an umbrella. She hissed something, tugging at Ramon's sleeve, but he shook off her hand. "This isn't over, Isabel. I'm going to sue." "Sue?" She started to close the door. "Just be sure to mention how you brought your mistress to my house. The judge will be interested." The door slammed shut in his face. Isabel listened to them pick up the boxes, to the arguing in muffled voices, to the slamming of car doors. Then everything went quiet. Only the rain continued to drum on the roof. "You did good," Consuelo said quietly. "You held your own like a true queen." Isabel turned slowly to her friend. There was a lump in her throat and her eyes stung, but she wouldn't let herself cry. Not now, not here, not because of them. "Come on," Consuelo took her hand gently. "We need to tidy up the bedroom. I'll help you change the linens." They went upstairs. The bedroom greeted them with the stale smell of Marisol's perfume, cloyingly sweet, suffocating. Consuelo opened the windows, letting in fresh air and the sound of rain. The two of them removed the old linens and spread out the new ones, fresh, smelling of lavender and cleanliness. "I have to go to work tomorrow," Isabel said suddenly. "Vacation's over." "Are you sure you're ready?" "No. But I can't let them ruin that too. School is a part of my life that belongs only to me." Consuelo nodded understandingly. "Okay, but I'll pick you up after school. And don't argue. You don't have to go through this alone." The morning was gray and dank. Isabel stood in front of the bathroom mirror trying to put on her usual expression of calm confidence. Dark shadows lingered under her eyes. She'd hardly slept that night, tossing and turning until dawn. Consuelo had already left for her morning shift at the hospital, leaving breakfast and a note of encouragement in the kitchen. Isabel wore her favorite work suit, dark blue, austere with a white blouse. It always gave her confidence before important classes or parent-teacher conferences. Today it seemed like armor, protecting her from the outside world. She arrived at school earlier than usual. The hallways were still empty. Only the janitor was mopping the floors, humming something to herself. Isabel went up to the second floor, to her office. Everything was the same. Stacks of notebooks on the desk, a map of literary places on the wall, pots of flowers on the windowsill. She began to prepare for the first lesson, laying out her textbooks and notes. Her hands trembled slightly, and her handwriting on the blackboard was uneven. Isabel erased what she had written and began again, forcing herself to focus on each letter. "Señora Garza?" Principal Ricardo Santiago's voice made her wince. "Are you back from vacation already?" "Yes, Señor Director." Isabel turned, trying to smile. "Decided not to wait until the end of the week." The principal looked at her carefully. He had learned to read his teachers' faces during his years at the school, and now he was clearly alarmed by Isabel's appearance. "Are you all right? You look tired." "I'm fine. Just a little family problem." The first lesson passed like a blur. Isabel spoke the usual words about literature, asked questions, checked homework. The students were answering, writing things down, but she could barely make sense of what was happening. Marisol's voice persisted in her head. "Ramon doesn't love you anymore." At recess, she went down to the teacher's lounge for coffee. Her colleagues were talking excitedly, but their voices sounded distant. Isabel poured herself a cup of coffee, accidentally spilling some on the table. Someone handed her a napkin and asked her something, and she answered in a casual manner, not listening to her own words. The second class was even harder than the first. The ninth grade was taking poetry, and Isabel had to talk about love lyrics. Every poem, every line about feelings and devotion resonated with pain. She faltered as she recited a poem she knew by heart and noticed the perplexed looks of the students. By mid-afternoon, she felt she could no longer be in the classroom. Her eyes were dark and her hands were shaking so badly that the chalk crumbled in her fingers. During the big break, Isabel went up to the school library, a quiet place where she often prepared for class. The library greeted her with its familiar silence and the smell of books. Isabel walked between the shelves to the far corner where an old leather couch stood. Here, among the worn volumes of classic literature, she finally allowed herself to cry. The tears flowed silently. She had learned to cry silently as a child, when she didn't want to disturb her parents with her sorrows. Isabel huddled on the couch, wrapping her arms around her knees and letting all the pain of the last few days come out. She didn't hear footsteps, and Principal Santiago's voice made her flinch. "Isabel? What's wrong?" She tried to get up, but he stopped her, sitting down next to her on the couch. "You don't have to pretend. I can see something serious is going on." His voice sounded paternally soft. Principal Santiago always treated his teachers like family, especially the young professionals he himself hired. Isabel had been one of the first people he had taken into the school, and in 10 years she had become almost a daughter to him. "Ramon," she stammered, trying to find the words. "I discovered that Ramon." Suddenly she told everything about the oddities in the house, the surveillance, the scene in the kitchen last night. The words flowed, punctuated by sobs. The principal listened in silence, only frowning harder and harder. "He wants to kick me out of my own house," Isabel finished. "Said he's going to file for divorce. But you own the house, right?" the director clarified. "Yes, the papers are in my name. I changed the locks yesterday, but you did the right thing." The principal stood up and walked around the library. "You know, Isabel, I've known Ernesto Salcedo for a long time." "With Ramon's boss?" She raised a surprised look at him. "Yes, we went to university together, and I think he would be very interested to know how his driver spends his working hours." "No, Señor Santiago, please," Isabel began, but the principal interrupted her. "Listen to me. This man betrayed you, humiliated you, tried to take away your home. He must be held accountable for his actions. Plus," he added thoughtfully, "using official transportation for personal use is a serious offense." Isabel remained silent, looking at her hands. She didn't want revenge, didn't want to hurt Ramon despite everything he'd done. But the principal was right. People shouldn't be allowed to ruin other people's lives with impunity. "I'll call Ernesto today," the principal said firmly. "And you, Isabel, go home. You won't be able to teach lessons in your condition." "But the children—" "I'll find someone to replace you. Take a couple of days off, recover. School isn't going anywhere." He helped her pack her things and walked her to the exit. Consuelo was already standing at the school gate. Somehow the principal had managed to call her. She hugged her friend and led her to her car. "Let's go to my place. Don't argue. You shouldn't be alone tonight." Isabel didn't argue. She felt a strange emptiness inside, as if all the strength had gone with the tears she had shed in the library. In the car, she leaned her head against the cool glass and closed her eyes. Outside the window, the city floated by, familiar, but now it was alien and uncomfortable. Director Ricardo Santiago sat in his office looking at the phone. The clock read 6 p.m. The workday was long over, but he was still at school. On the desk was Isabel's file, a folder with her perfect report card, thank you notes from her parents, and lesson plans written in her neat handwriting. Finally, he picked up the phone and dialed a number he hadn't dialed in years. After the third ring, a familiar voice said, "Ernesto Salcedo here." "Hello, old friend." Ricardo leaned back in his chair. "It's been a long time." "Ricardo? What a surprise. How many years, how many winters?" They exchanged the usual pleasantries, how things were going, how the family was, how the business was. Then Ricardo got down to business. "Ernesto, do you employ a driver named Ramon Aguirre?" "Yes, a good worker. Why?" "A good worker, you say?" Ricardo drummed his fingers on the table. "And you know he uses the company car for his love affairs?" Silence hung in the receiver. Then Ernesto said slowly, "Explain more." Ricardo told everything he had learned from Isabel. With each word, his voice grew harsher. He felt righteous anger for his teacher, for her broken life, for the betrayal she had endured. "So, instead of working, he's having fun with his mistress?" Steel sounded in Ernesto's voice. "And he's using my truck as a cover." "Exactly. And you know what the most disgusting thing is? He's trying to kick his wife out of her own house." Ernesto swore, short and succinct. "His wife is the same teacher you always spoke highly of." "Yes, Isabel Garza. She's been with me for 10 years. She's the best teacher I've ever met." "I'll handle it," Ernesto said firmly. "I'll call him tomorrow to talk to him." At the same time in Consuelo's apartment, Isabel was sitting in the kitchen, staring blankly into a cup of cooled tea. Her friend was huddled nearby, preparing dinner and trying to get her to talk. "You have to eat, Isa. You can't just—" Isabel's phone vibrated. There was a message from Ramon. "We need to talk. It's important." She silently showed the screen to Consuelo. "Don't even think about answering it," she said firmly. "Let him suffer." In the morning, Ramon drove to the transportation company as usual. He parked the truck and headed toward the control room, but was stopped by a guard. "Señor Aguirre, the owner is waiting for you, immediately." Ernesto Salcedo's office was cool and dark. The blinds on the windows were down. The master himself was sitting at a massive desk, poring over some papers. He silently indicated a chair for Ramon. "Sit down. We need to have a serious talk." Ramon lowered himself into the chair, feeling a chill run down his spine. Something in the supervisor's voice foreshadowed big trouble. "I checked the trip sheets for the last 6 months." Ernesto tapped his finger on the papers in front of him. "Interesting numbers come up. You show a mileage of 2,000 kilometers, but you've actually traveled about half of that. Where do the other kilometers go, Ramon?" "Señor Salcedo, I can explain." "You can," Ernesto nodded. "And you will explain, as well as why you use official transportation for personal use, and why you're cheating on your wife under the guise of working for my company." Ramon turned pale. "Who told you?" "It doesn't matter. What matters is that you abused my trust, used my name and my property for your dirty deeds. I'll make it up to you." "You will," Ernesto nodded stiffly. "Every last peso. And here's something else, Ramon. I hear you're trying to kick your wife out of her house?" "That's our private business," Ramon tried to object. "Not anymore. You used my company to defraud me, made me an unwitting accomplice, so now it's my business too." He pulled some document from the desk. Here's the calculation of all your frauds. Fake trip sheets, unaccounted fuel, misuse of transportation. It adds up to a lot of money. Ramon was silent, staring at the floor. Ernesto continued. You have two options. One, I turn these documents over to the police. The second is that you stop all attempts to take the house from your wife and compensate the company for the damage you've done. Take your pick. At this time, Isabel was sitting in the school principal's office. Ricardo Santiago was telling her about the conversation with Ernesto. He'll sort it out, don't doubt it. Ernesto is a man of principle and fairness. I shouldn't have dragged you into this story, Isabel said quietly. We should have, the director replied firmly. We can't allow people like your husband to ruin other people's lives with impunity. There was a knock at the door. It was Consuelo. She came in, nodding to the principal. Pardon the intrusion, but I thought Isabel needed some support. The three of them were sitting in the office when the principal's phone rang. It was Ernesto. It's done, old friend. Your teacher can rest easy. That rascal won't bother her anymore. Ricardo put the phone on speaker so that Isabel could hear the conversation too. Ernesto talked about the meeting with Ramon, about his reaction to the charges. He broke quickly. He agreed to all the terms. He would pay the company for the damage and leave the house alone. I made him write a receipt. Isabel listened in silence, only gripping Consuelo's hand tighter. There was an emptiness inside, no joy, no triumph, only weariness and deafening pain. Thank you, she said at last. Thank you all. You're welcome, dear. Ernesto's voice softened. I know what it's like to be betrayed by the people closest to you. Hang in there. After the conversation, the principal poured coffee for everyone. They sat in his office. The teacher, her nurse friend, and the elderly school principal, such different people united in their desire to defend justice. What now? Consuelo asked. Now? Isabel set the cup on the table. Now I get to move on with my life. I have a job, a home, friends. The rest will come. She returned home that evening, alone, having refused Consuelo's offer to stay another night. The house greeted her with silence and emptiness, but it was no longer the oppressive emptiness of betrayal, but the quiet emptiness of a new beginning. Friday began as usual. Isabel woke up to her alarm clock, made breakfast, and got ready for work. She had already learned not to flinch at the sight of the empty half of the bed, not to listen to non-existent footsteps in the house. The new reality was gradually becoming familiar, although it was still painful. At school, the students whispered behind her back as rumors of the Marisol scandal spread instantly. Isabel pretended not to notice the stares and the sudden lulls in conversation as she entered the classroom. She just did her job explaining the new material, checking homework, giving grades. After the third lesson, Maria, a quiet girl from the 9th grade, approached her. Senora Garza, can I talk to you? They stepped out into the empty hallway. Maria was rubbing the edge of her school skirt, hesitant to start a conversation. I just wanted to say, she stammered. My mom went through the same thing when my dad left her for someone else, and she got through it, and you'll get through it. Isabel felt her eyes stinging. She gently touched the girl's shoulder. Thank you, Maria. It means a lot to me. The day stretched slowly. In their last lesson in 11th grade, they were reviewing Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude. Isabel spoke of love and betrayal, of the strength of the human spirit and the ability to start over, and every word resonated with the pain in her own heart. After class, she lingered in the classroom, gathering her notebooks. There was a knock at the door. It was the principal's secretary. Senora Garza, you have a visitor, a man. Ramon stood in the hallway. He looked gaunt, with shadows under his eyes and a wrinkled shirt. When he saw Isabel, he stepped forward. We need to talk. About what? She clutched the stack of notebooks tighter to her chest, as if protecting herself with them. "I think it's all been said." "Not here," he looked around. "Let's go outside." "No. If you have something to say it here." Ramon ran his hand over his face, a gesture she'd once loved, one that always meant he was worried. "I lost my job. Salcedo fired me. It's your own fault." "Yes, my fault." He raised his voice. "I blew it, I know. But now I have nothing left." Marisol left as soon as she heard about the dismissal. Isabel felt the bitter irony of the situation. The woman for whom Ramon had ruined their marriage had abandoned him at the first hardship. "What do you want from me?" she asked quietly. "Let me come back." He stepped closer. "I'll make it right, I swear. We'll start over." "At first?" Isabel laughed, and that laugh sounded more like a sob. "You can't start over, Ramon. You can't just erase everything you've done." "I love you." He tried to take her hand, but she pulled away. "I'm only realizing it now. Marisol was a mistake." "A mistake 6 months long? A mistake you brought into our home, my house?" Students appeared in the hallway. Extra classes were ending. They looked curiously at the literature teacher and the strange man, clearly having a difficult conversation. "Let's go out," Ramon asked again. "To a cafe, to the square, wherever you say. We can talk quietly." "No," Isabel shook her head. "It's over between us, Ramon. You decided that yourself when you first brought her into the house." "I can't be without you." A pleading note appeared in his voice. "These days without you, it's like I'm not living." "And me? How do you think I felt all these months? When I felt something was wrong but didn't realize what? When I found signs of someone else's presence in my house? When I found out the truth?" The students were already frankly pandering in the distance, watching the scene. Isabel spotted Maria among them. The girl looked at her with concern and support. "Please," Ramon grabbed her by the shoulders. "Give me another chance. Let me go. I won't let go until you listen." "Let Señora Garza go at once," came the imperious voice of Principal Santiago, "or I will call the police." Ramon slowly unclenched his fingers. Isabel took a step back, feeling her knees shake. The principal stepped between them. "You are on school property. This is not the place to get personal." "This is my wife," Ramon said stubbornly. "Not anymore," Isabel replied firmly. "And she never will be again." "You'll regret it," Ramon's voice turned menacing. "When you're all alone." "She's not alone," came Maria's voice. The girl stepped forward, standing next to the teacher. "She has us, her students, and we won't let you hurt her." Other students began to approach as well, surrounding Isabel in a tight ring. Someone pulled out a cell phone and started filming what was happening. Ramon looked around confused, clearly not expecting this turn of events. "Security!" The director called out again, and a familiar guard appeared in the hallway. "Escort this gentleman to the exit, and alert the gatehouse. He's not allowed to enter the school." As Ramon was led away, Isabel felt her strength leave her. She leaned against the wall, trying to keep her balance. Maria gently took her hand. "Señora Garza, may I walk you to the teacher's lounge?" The teacher's lounge was quiet and empty. Everyone had already gone home. Principal Santiago poured Isabel some water and called Consuelo. She arrived 15 minutes later, out of breath and anxious. "I'm going to kill him," she said from the doorstep. "How dare he?" "It's all over now," Isabel said tiredly. "It's really over now." They sat in silence in the teacher's lounge, the literature teacher, the nurse, and the elderly principal. Outside the window, dusk was falling, and the corridors of the school were becoming quiet. Somewhere in the distance, the voices of the last students leaving the building could be heard. "You know what?" Consuelo suddenly said. "Let's go to my place. We'll cook dinner, watch some movie. You don't need to be alone right now." "Go," the principal nodded. And I'll call Ernesto, warn him. Let him know his former employee could cause trouble. They left the school when it was already completely dark. The cool evening air refreshed Isabel's heated face. She walked to Consuelo's car and thought about the amazing way life worked, losing someone close to her and finding support where she hadn't expected to find it. Isabel spent the weekend at Consuelo's house. Her friend hadn't wanted to leave her alone after what had happened at school, and Isabel was grateful for her concern. They talked a lot, cooked together, watched old movies. Consuelo told funny stories from the hospital, trying to distract her friend from her heavy thoughts. On Sunday night, Isabel decided to go home after all. Consuelo had offered to stay another night, but she knew she couldn't hide under her friend's wing forever. I need to learn to live on my own, she said as she packed her things. Sooner or later, I'll have to go home. Then at least I'll walk you home, Consuelo said firmly. At home, everything was the same as it had been 2 days ago. A cup of unfinished tea on the kitchen table, an open book on the couch, unfinished student notebooks on the desk. Isabel walked slowly through the rooms, turning on the lights. Consuelo followed, scrutinizing every corner as if expecting to find Ramon lurking there. It's okay, Isabel smiled. The new locks are secure. He couldn't have gotten in. Still, Consuelo frowned. Maybe we should install an alarm system? After his last words, he won't hurt me, Isabel shook her head. Ramon said a lot of things in the heat of the moment, but he's not capable of violence. They cooked dinner together, a simple salad and warmed lasagna that Consuelo had brought from home. Over the meal, they discussed the upcoming work week. Isabel said she was going to start a new topic with her students, contemporary Latin American poetry. You know, she said thoughtfully as she covered the rest of the lasagna with food wrap, I've wanted to organize a poetry night at school for a long time. Maybe now would be a good time. Consuelo looked at her friend carefully. Are you sure you're up for such a project? After everything that's happened? That's exactly why. I need to move on, fill my life with something new. Otherwise, I'll just drown in memories. When Consuelo finally left, insisting Isabel promised to call at the slightest alarm, the house was unaccustomedly quiet. Only the ticking of the clock on the wall broke the silence. Isabel sat down at her desk and pulled out her notebooks. Work always helped her cope with her anxiety. Checking ninth-grade essays, she came across Maria's work. The girl wrote about the strength of the human spirit, about the ability to overcome difficulties. Between the lines, it was felt that she spoke not only about literary heroes, but also about her teacher. Isabel gave the highest grade, adding a detailed comment. Monday morning began with a phone call. Principal Santiago called, "Good morning, Isabel. How are you feeling?" "Better, thanks. I'm going to work." "That's what I wanted to talk to you about." There was concern in his voice. "Maybe you could take a few more days off?" "No," she replied firmly. "I want to work. Besides, I have an idea for a poetry night." She told the principal her plan. Santiago listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "You know, that's a great idea. The school lacks events like this. Prepare a plan. We'll discuss the details when we meet." There was a surprise waiting for Isabel at school. On her desk was a bouquet of wildflowers. Attached to it was a note written in children's handwriting. From the ninth-grade students, "We are with you, Senora Garza." She taught her first class, trying to ignore the curious stares of the students. Everyone already knew about Friday's incident. News travels fast at school. But instead of the expected ridicule or disdain, she felt support and sympathy. At big recess, a group of upperclassmen approached her. "Senora Garza, is it true that you want to organize a poetry recital?" "Yes, I was just about to discuss it with the class." She looked at them in surprise. "How did you know?" "The principal said at the morning lineup, 'We want to participate.'" By the end of the day, she had a tentative list of those who wanted to perform. Students offered their favorite poems. Some even ventured to read their own compositions. Isabel could feel the long-forgotten enthusiasm inside her, the same enthusiasm that had once led her into teaching. After class, she lingered in the classroom, working on a plan for the evening. There was a cautious knock at the door. It was the janitor, an older woman who had worked at the school the longest. "Senora Garza, there's someone here to see you." Isabel tensed, expecting to see Ramon or Marisol, but Ernesto Salcedo appeared in the doorway. He looked a little embarrassed. "I apologize for the intrusion. Ricardo said you could be found here. Is something wrong?" "No, just wanted to give you a heads up." He made his way into the classroom, looking at the portraits of writers hanging on the walls. "Ramon came to see me today, asked me to return the work." "And what did you say?" "Refused, of course, but he was strange, aggressive, said he'd lost everything because of you." Isabel slowly gathered the papers from the desk. "I didn't ask you to fire him." "No," Ernesto shook his head. "But he broke company rules, and my trust. I couldn't let it go without consequences." They were silent for a moment. Outside the window, the sun was setting, its slanting rays coloring the classroom blackboard in golden tones. Somewhere in the hallway, the voices of lingering students could be heard. "Be careful," Ernesto finally said. "Ramon blames you for all his troubles. People like that can be unpredictable." "Thank you for the warning," Isabel smiled. "But I'm not afraid of him. I'm not afraid anymore." In the evening, she went for a walk for the first time in a long time. Just wandered the familiar streets, looking at the storefronts, watching the passers-by. The city lived its usual life. Couples in love holding hands, mothers leading their children from school, old people sitting on benches at the entrances. As she passed a bookstore, Isabel noticed a new collection of poetry in the window. She stepped inside, breathing in the familiar smell of books and printing ink. The saleswoman, who knew her as a regular customer, smiled welcomingly. "It's been a long time since we've seen you, Senora Garza." Isabel bought the collection and a few other books for the school library. As she left the store, she felt light. For the first time in weeks, she did something just for herself, without thinking about problems and worries. At home, she made tea, settled into her favorite chair, and opened a new book. Outside the window, dusk was fading. The streetlights were turning on. The phone rang. Consuelo's, of course. Her friend called every night, checking to see if everything was okay. Isabel told her about the flowers from the students, the poetry night, the conversation with Ernesto. "I'm proud of you," Consuelo said. "You're doing better than I expected." "You know," Isabel looked at the book in her hands, "I think it's going to be okay. Not right away, not tomorrow, but it will be." On the table lay an unfinished plan for the event, a list of those who wished to participate, drafts of future speeches. Tomorrow would be a new day, new lessons, new worries.